Good evening. My name is Rachel Young Fields, and I'm the president of the Savannah Book Festival Board of Directors. On behalf of my fellow board members and the festival staff, welcome to opening night of the 15th annual Savannah Book Festival. Yeah. Presented by our good friends and dedicated supporters, Georgia Power, David and Nancy Cintron, Betty Lancaster, the Philip E. and Nancy B. Beekman Foundation, and the Gerald D. and Helen M. Stevens Foundation, with a special thanks to a grant from Georgia Humanities. Well, we certainly missed seeing you in person last year, but we are delighted to be here together tonight in the Lucas Theater, where it all started 15 years ago, to kick off what will surely be another incredible festival weekend. Before this evening's address, we hosted a reception to honor our literati members who are the foundation of the Savannah Book Festival. For the past 15 years, literati members from across our community and across the country have faithfully supported our mission of celebrating the written word in Savannah, and we are so grateful. Would all the literati members please stand? We appreciate you being such a significant support system for the festival. I also want to recognize Mark and Pat Suen as the generous sponsor of tonight's opening event with David Baldacci. Yes, thank you for making tonight possible. Each year, the festival relies on a network of approximately 200 volunteers who are book lovers just like you and me, without whom there would be no festival. Some of the special volunteers are serving as your ushers here tonight, so please join me in giving a round of applause for members of Overbooked, Literati and Lunch, and Lit in the Afternoon book clubs. I would also like to thank the 24 authors who are participating this year in SBF at schools. Through this program, festival authors visit public and private middle and high schools and universities in our community, giving Savannah students a chance to interact with these nationally recognized and prize-winning authors. And we are very proud to be able to facilitate this enriching experience for our local learners. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank my predecessor in the role of board president, Bo Anders. Bo, will you stand? I will wager that no person here tonight reads more books than Bo does. Bo not only served as board president for 3 years, he capably and calmly guided this organization when, right after the 2020 festival, everything in the world changed. Thank you, Bo, for playing your significant part in allowing us to be here tonight. Well, we hope you'll be with us throughout the festival, including on Festival Saturday, which, as always, is free and open to the public, thanks to your generosity and support. And this year, we'll be able to reach even more book lovers by live streaming most of the authors on Festival Saturday. If you haven't already, be sure to download the Savannah Book Festival app, which is an incredibly helpful tool for this weekend, with information about authors, times, and venues. Please look in your program for information on downloading it to your phone. We'd like to remind you to turn off your cell phones. Please do that if you haven't already. And we also ask that you not use flash photography. Immediately following his presentation, David Baldacci will be signing festival-purchased copies of his book. A numbered signing card will be provided by our booksellers from Ex Libris to secure your place in line. Now, it is my pleasure to turn it over to SBF board member, SCAD writing professor, and author Jonathan Rabb, who will introduce Mr. Baldacci this evening. So please welcome Jonathan Rabb.
It is a pleasure to be here tonight to open the 2022 Savannah Book Festival back in person with one of the most riveting novelists of the last quarter century. David Baldacci has been a standard bearer for those who venture into the world of edge-of-your-seat political thrillers. Ever since his Absolute Power became an instant New York Times bestseller in 1996, then feature film directed and starring Clint Eastwood, Mr. Baldacci has drawn us into worlds that are both frightening and familiar, and always with an immediacy that has us gasping for our collective breaths with each turn of the page. Most writers dream of having a single series that will catch the public's ever-evolving imagination. Mr. Baldacci has had 8 such series, not to mention his standalone books, totaling 44 novels in 45 languages in 80 countries, with sales of over 150 million copies worldwide. The numbers are staggering, but they are clearly a testament to the breadth of his ingenuity and the scope of his considerable talents as a storyteller. He is a master of intrigue and has an uncanny, almost encyclopedic sense for the details of the worlds that live in the shadows. But always, he is a writer who thrills, surprises, and most of all, challenges us to see what might be hiding in plain sight. Such is the power and insight of Mr. Baldacci's work. Not only a prolific writer, though, Mr. Baldacci is a devoted philanthropist, and his greatest efforts have been dedicated to his family's Wish You Well Foundation. Established by Mr. Baldacci and his wife, Michelle, the Wish You Well Foundation supports family and adult literacy programs in the United States. In 2008, the foundation partnered with Feeding America to launch Feeding Body and Mind, a program to address the connection between literacy, poverty, and hunger. Through Feeding Body and Mind, more than 1 million new and gently used books have been collected and distributed through food banks to families in need. Evidently, Mr. Baldacci's dedication to other, more troubling shadow worlds within our own is no less admirable. We are indeed lucky to have him here with us tonight to open the festival, and it is therefore with deep admiration that I introduce David Baldacci.
Oh. Thank you very much. I can't see you, but I'm sure you're out there, right? The way the lights are. Thank you for coming out tonight. You know, quite frankly, I don't think I'd come out to see me. So it's very nice you made that choice. I do have to say that, you know, cherish this festival. I've been all over this country. I've been all over the world in book-related events. Not every place has a book festival. Not every place has a book festival as fine as this one. And the last thing you should do is take it for granted, because when you take things for granted, they tend to go away. So keep your support up. Keep coming out every year, supporting great books and writers in the reading community. When I'm out on book tour, I get a lot of questions from people. And one I get more than any other is, what is it like to be this best-selling novelist? And I know the way they ask the question, they want some glamorous Hollywood answer, like, you know, I get up at noon every day. And I put on my favorite sweater, and I have a small dog that I carry under my arm. And I go down to my study where I have a bevy of people to write down everything I might say. My life is not like that at all. Just ask my wife. You know, I go to a cool event, I come home, I'm telling her about it. She stops me halfway through. Yeah, it's trash night. Get on it. I have never written about a damsel in distress in my life. Why? I've never met one. So anyway, in answer to that question, what is it like to be a best-selling novelist, I would tell people true stories about my kids. My kids are grown now, but when they were little, I took my daughter, when she was around 5 years old, I took her to a book signing that I was going to do because I wanted her to know sort of what Dad did. It's sort of hard to explain to a little kid. Dad sits home and he writes these books. So we went to the bookstore, and the lady who owned it came over and introduced herself, and she knelt down and she asked my daughter, "Do you know why all these people are here?" And my daughter said, "Yes, I know." "Why are they here?" "They want my dad to sign their book." "And why do they want that?" My daughter said, "Well, it's obvious. My dad has the nicest handwriting." She's 28 now, and I think she still believes that. It's the whole key to my success, just that signature. Now, when my son was around 2, I took him to a bookstore, not to do a signing. We were just going to go there and buy some books. And my son has always been like my little entrepreneur guy, my little business head guy. So we walked in the store, and he saw all the books and all the people reading. And it's like this light bulb went off in my kid's head. And he started running across the bookstore, screaming at the top of his lungs, "My daddy will sign any book you've got for $2. Does not matter who wrote it. He will sign it. So that's what it's like to be a best-selling novelist. Now, I have written a lot of novels, and I've been doing this a long time. Interesting phenomena occurs when you've written so many books and you travel as much as I do. I'm rarely out in public where I don't see someone reading one of my books. And I have a rule about that. It's a very good rule. I will never go up to a person if they're reading one of my novels, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm actually a private person. I wouldn't want to invade someone's privacy in an abrupt way like that. And secondly, and far more importantly, if they're not enjoying the book, I don't want to hear about it. That's what Amazon.com review boards are for. You can go on Amazon.com and anonymously trash any writer you want. For some reason, I went on there a few years ago and I read a review that a woman had written about one of my novels. She gave me 1 star out of 5, and she was lamenting the fact that that was the lowest Amazon allowed, because otherwise she would have given me 0 stars. And in her review, she said, "My biggest problem with this book is that I figured it out in the last 3 pages and therefore found it predictable." The fact that I kept her spellbound for 487 pages, I got no credit for that. But it really has changed the way I write my novels. You may have noticed this, such that the ending is no longer included in one of my books. On the back of the dust jacket flap, we have the 1-800 number for you to call. We accept all major credit cards. If you want to get the actual ending, because I don't want to be predictable, okay? I was on a plane one time, and I'm just sitting there while we're flying along. Everything's fine. And then the pilot comes out of the cockpit, and I see him sort of whispering to the flight attendant, and they're kind of looking over at me. And my first thought was, did I take 2 bags of peanuts? And finally, the pilot came over and sat down next to me. And I'm getting a little worried now. And he says, "Look, I got a great idea for a novel. Do you want to hear it?" I'm not making this up. This actually happened to me. I don't know about you, but I like 2 pilots flying every plane that I'm on. So I made a deal with him. I said, "If you get back up in the cockpit and you land the sucker safely, I'll wait, after everybody gets off the plane, I'll listen to your story." So he landed. I waited. He told me. It sucked. The story was so bad. But I didn't want to tell him that. So I said, tried to be as diplomatic as possible. I said, "You know what? The great thing is that you are doing with your life exactly what you should be doing with your life. I can't fly a plane. That's hard, right? But not everybody can write a book either, and you unfortunately happen to be one of them. So that's just the way those things are sometimes." But I have to admit, I love meeting people out in public who I can tell right away are readers. You just can spot people. I can talk to people for like 2 minutes and know whether they're a reader or not. For me, they just strike me as being more interested, more curious about life. They're just, very much positive. It's a very positive vibe you get from people like that, and I like that very much. I have a bunch of television and film projects in the works. John Puller series is Fox Network bought that over the summer, and they're putting together a television series for John Puller, yeah. About 5 years ago, I was approached by a studio, and they said, hey, you want to write an original idea for us, just an idea concept, and maybe we can turn it into something. And so I did. It was called Gray, and it was about a spy master, a female spy master who long ago had sort of, been at the top of her game, and then she'd gotten outed, and for the last 25 years, she's sort of been running undercover, and then she gets outed again. So it's very much female-driven. And nothing ever happened, for like 5 years. I just figured it was dead until I got a call from them and said that they're going to start filming this in Canada this summer. It has two really great female actresses, Patricia Clarkson, who's done a lot of great stuff, nominated for Oscars and Emmys, and a young actress, Natalia Emmanuel, who was on Game of Thrones and Fast and Furious. So it's a crazy world out there. Some of the projects that I thought were just going to be surefire, going to get done, never happened. And the ones that I forgot about because nothing ever happened, turned out that something happened. I was over the summer, I got a call from my agent and said, do you know that they're filming One Summer, your novel One Summer right now? And I said, no, I had no idea. Hallmark was filming it. I, by the way, am the only thriller writer on earth who's had not one but two Hallmark movies made of their books, which just shows how deep and shallow I happen to be. Village Roadshow optioned the Memory Man series about a year ago. We've been shopping that around with Amos Decker. We have a couple more pitches to go, and hopefully that one will get on. And then I got a call last week that a big production company, director, and showrunner has picked up the Atlee Pine series for television as well, which I've always really wanted that one to go, just because I like the fact that I wrote a book years ago, the first King and Maxwell book, Split Second. And in that, I mentioned that Michelle Maxwell was a member of WIFL. And WIFL is a real organization. It's an acronym. It stands for Women in Federal Law Enforcement. Because the federal law enforcement agencies, law enforcement in general, is still a very male-dominated field. There's no really good reason for that. There are lots of bad reasons for that. And I just wanted to show that women could do any of these jobs, probably a lot better than men could do. And I got a call from the head of WIFL when the book came out and said, you're the only author who's ever mentioned WIFL in a book. Would you like to come and be our keynote speaker at our annual convention? So I flew in, and I was in a ballroom with 500 women. All of them were armed. Never been that intimidated in my life. And I was a trial lawyer for 10 years, so that's, but it was just, so I really hope the Atlee Pine series goes, because really the Atlee Pine series came about because I wanted to have a female FBI agent as a lead in a series, and if that comes to television, that would be really cool. This year I have 3 books coming out. The only silver lining for me with COVID was that all my travel was canceled. I just sat home and wrote, nonstop. So in April, it'll be the 3rd Aloysius Archer novel called Dreamtown. It's set in the New Year's Eve, 1952. Archer is my PI gumshoe. He's been in LA now for 3 years. He gets involved in a pretty messy case. I love writing in that time period because it was such a transition after the Depression and the World War. Everybody wanted peace and something new and something better and something that didn't involve either a depression or a war. And a lot of people moved west because of that. They just pulled themselves up, and a lot of people went to California. And a lot of great things happened out there, and a lot of bad things happened out there. And Archer's sort of right in between that world. So I was a history minor in college, and I've always loved history. So reading about that world and exploring that world and looking at old maps, of that time period and just talking to people who lived during that time period, it's a fascinating thing for me. Aside from writing the books, it's just a lot of fun to learn that. In July, I have a book called The 620 Man. And when I was in Florida last year, I was on my bike riding, and I had this idea for a novel that just consumed me. And so I went home and started writing, and 2 months later, I'd finished this novel called The 620 Man. And the 620 refers to the train he takes in from Mount Kisco into Manhattan every day at 6:20 a.m. He works on Wall Street. He was a former Army Ranger, never called it former. He was an Army Ranger. And now he had to leave the Army under a cloud. And he passes by a certain house every day on the 620, and he sees something there that sort of changes his life. If I had to pitch this as a movie, I would say it's like the movie Wall Street meets Gone Girl meets Girl on the Train. And I'll just leave it at that. And then in the fall, in October, I have another Amos Decker Memory Man novel coming. I just finished that actually about 2 weeks ago. So it'll be 3 books this year. And I have to tell you that I write all my own books. It's a funny disclaimer to have to make, but when you think about it, warning, warning, this writer wrote this book. I grew up as a library rat. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in the 60s and 70s. Heavily segregated back then. We still had all the statues. We finally got rid of those about a year ago. And I could have grown up a very different person because of that. I grew up with a lot of people whose perspectives and ideas and opinions sort of trapped in that time period in the 60s and 70s, never really changed. But what saved me were books. I would go to the library every week and I check out more than I was supposed to because all the librarians knew me and they knew that I was going to read every book that I checked out. So even though I never left Richmond as a kid, I saw the world through books. So I learned about people who didn't look like me, dress like me, eat like me, pray like me, learn like me. But I understood they shared that common core of humanity, all of us. We were as one, a human being. And that really changed me. And the other part that changed me about reading was that the only reason I'm a writer today is because I was a reader when I was a young kid. And I was so enthralled and fascinated and immersed and just worshipful of books that I wanted to create my own one day. And when I was 7 or 8 years old, in the neighborhood, I was sort of the kid designated. I came up with all of our adventures that we would do, during the summer and after school. We'd go fight wars, and we'd go rescue people, and we'd have these adventures, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, that kind of stuff. And I was the kid who sort of choreographed all that, came up with all of our lines and all the scenes, and I just loved that. And I also was one of those kids that never shut up. I just talked nonstop. So much so that I grew up in the street called Austin Avenue in Richmond, and they used to start calling me the Austin Avenue lawyer, which is really weird since I grew up to be a lawyer. But I just never shut up. I was always getting into arguments with people, and that was just who I was. So one day when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, my mom brought me a blank page book, a journal, and said, honey, all the stuff you've been talking about, why don't you try writing some of it down? You love to read. Why don't you try creating your own sort of stories? And I remember when my pencil hit that paper, it was kind of this epiphany, just this revelation of, oh my God, I can transfer what's up here to here, and I can create something that I would go to the library and cherish. And I never looked back from that moment on. I started writing short stories for years, and then screenplays and teleplays and novellas, and then finally novels. And I went back to my mom years later, and I said, Mom, what a gift you gave me that day. It really changed my whole life. The trajectory of my whole life was changed by that one gift. And she said, honey, I'm so glad it's worked out for you. But quite frankly, I just wanted to shut you the hell up. I'm your mother. I will love you until my dying day. But son, you just gotten on my last nerve. So whatever the motivation for the gift, it was still a gift. Now, it's fascinating that when you write a book, and you think, okay, I wrote a book and I sent it out and that'll be the end of it. But I wrote a book years ago called The Winner. And The Winner, for me, had a second life. And here's how it happened. Just to give you sort of the concept of The Winner, I came up with a villain named Jackson, and he figured out a way, a foolproof, surefire way to fix the United States National Lottery, so that he could pick the winners and the numbers every time. Not with this broad-based conspiracy, but he approached it from a scientific perspective, and it was foolproof. So the book came out, and the only problem was a sort of Faustian component to the story. He would only go after people who were in great distress, who were poor. And he would go to them and say, you're poor, I can make you rich. All you have to do is play. I can make you win the lottery. You'll have all this money. All your worries go away. It's not right. It's wrong. It's unethical. It's illegal. But no one will know except you and me. So will you play? And I remember going out on tour with that book. And I made that sort of the same pitch to people. I said, what would you say? Would you play? And people were like, of course not. That's wrong. How much was the winning of that? Well, I could give some of it to charity if I won to make myself feel better. So anyway, that's sort of the gist of the winner. And so the book came out, and a couple of years went by. And I got a call from a reporter from La Repubblica, which is the largest daily newspaper in Rome. And very dramatically, he said, Mr. Baldacci, have you been following the Italian national lottery scandal? And I said, why no, I must have missed that. He said, well, someone over here figured out how to fix the Italian national lottery, and they did it in a way that was almost identical to the method used in the winner. Do you have a comment on that, sir? And I was like, well, I have two comments. My first comment is, that's bad, very bad. I would never encourage anyone to fix the lottery. That's a crime. Just don't do it. My second comment, that is like the coolest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. My method was validated. But please do not rush out and buy the winner and then go fix the lottery. I will feel bad about it. You will feel even worse when they catch you and put you in prison. Now, David Baldacci, I'm obviously Italian. Although I joke with people sometimes and say, it's a really good Irish name, Baldacci. In all of my books around the world, I am published under the name David Baldacci, except one book in one country in one language. I was at home before Absolute Power was published anywhere, and I had a call from my agent in New York. And he says, I have your publisher, Mondadori, in my office right now, my Italian publisher, the largest publisher in Italy. They think Absolute Power is going to be fantastic for them. But I'm calling you because they have a tiny problem with the name. And I said, well, Absolute Power should translate really well into Italian, but if it doesn't, they can pick another name. Other countries did that. In Germany, if you go look for Absolute Power, you won't find it. In Germany, it's called Der Präsident. It just worked better for them. And he said, no, they have no problem with the title. It's a great title for them. They're going to use Absolute Power. They have a problem with your name. So I said, my Italian publisher has a problem with my Italian name? He said, yeah, it's a big problem for them. I said, well, why is that? He said, well, their experience has been that Italians don't want to read other Italians. I was like, well, Machiavelli and Puzo had pretty good careers. He said, well, the problem is that, people want to read American thriller writers, like they want to see American movies. So they see Baldacci on the cover, they'll think you're just an Italian writer, and they won't read it. And other American writers have had to, Americanize their names as well. And I said, well, what sort of a name do they want? And he said, well, they would really like an American name. And I said, but we're a country of immigrants. I mean, we're from all over. He goes, well, he says, just think about it and give me a call back. I said, no. If you say they're in their office right now, you give me 5 seconds, I'll come up with the greatest American name they've ever heard. So I remember putting the phone down and going, oh my God, what do I do now? And I looked out the window, and back then we had an Explorer. So I picked the phone up and said, I want to be called David Ford. And right away, my agent said, that sounds American. He's really quick, my agent. He's just right on it. He said, let me try it out in the Italian. So I hear him telling the Italians he wants to be called David Ford. Now, the next word is screamed out by the chairman of Mondadori so loudly I can hear him even though he's not holding the phone. And he screams out the word, genius! So my agent gets back on the phone and he goes, oh my God, David, they love it. How in the world did you think of that so fast? And I said, hey, this stuff oozes off of me 24/7. I do have to say, thank God we sold the Subaru, though. That might have been a problem. So, Absolute Power by David Ford, #1 bestseller in Italy. I've heard that Ford is a very fine man. My second novel, I was David, middle initial B. Ford. My third novel, I was David Baldacci Ford. They had to make the book a little wider to accommodate all those names. And my fourth book, and all those since, I'm David Baldacci. So that just goes to show you sometimes. Now, here's the kicker. This is not apocryphal. This is also true. So when I went over to the tour for the book, I toured with the chairman of Mondadori, the guy who screamed out genius. He was very well known over there. And we were introduced together on stage in a number of events all the way across Italy. And this may remind you of a movie that came out maybe a couple of years ago, because his last name was Ferrari. So we were introduced on stage every night as Ford and Ferrari. God, they don't teach you this in novel writing school, let me tell you. Now, again, being Italian-American, I found out long ago that my grandfather had grown up in a little village called Barga, which is in Tuscany, about an hour and a half north of Pisa. And I'd always wanted to go there. My dad had always wanted to go there too, as a young man. Never had the opportunity. The closest he got was Egypt. But the United States Navy said, you can go to Italy, we're still fighting this world war, so you got to hang around and finish that up. So he never had an opportunity to go. And when he passed away, I made the decision, I'm going to go for my dad and for me. So we went over there, my kids were young, and we traveled with a couple other families who had young kids as well. And before we left to go there, I got an email from the mayor of Barga. And he said, I read that you were going to be spending your holiday in Italy, which is kind of freaky, creepy. And we would love for you to come to Barga, and I'd love to take you to lunch. And I said, this is fantastic. We were going to go there anyway. And so we set the date. We flew over. We were staying at a villa about a couple of hours away. The date came for us to go to Barga, so we got into a couple of cars with everybody. Now, I don't know how much any of you have driven overseas, but in Italy, it's almost impossible to drive from point A to point B. And we had the other problem that we had a navigation system. Now, it's called Hertz Never Lost, right? If you're in a car over here, you have Hertz Never Lost. In Italy, it's a little bit different name. It's called Hertz Always Lost. I have never been in Italy driving anywhere where the actual navigation system worked when I needed it to work. So we're driving along, we're a little bit late, and about a half an hour outside of Barga, our navigation system went on holiday and was never seen again. And so my poor wife is having to navigate using paper maps that are probably, written in Italian. And I was getting a little, frustrated. I was a trial lawyer for 10 years, and you're taught never be late. You can never be late, never be late. Judges don't like that. So I'm very punctual. And finally, we were like, it was past time we were supposed to be there, and we got to this crossroads with some buildings. And I stopped, I looked at my wife, and I said, do you think this is Barga? Do you think this is it? And she glanced out the window, and she said, well, considering that there's a 14-foot tall poster of you on the wall over there, it's a good bet we're in Barga. And then we noticed all these people and all this traffic and policemen directing traffic. And I rolled down the window and I got the attention of a police officer. He came over in my broken Italian, his broken English. I said, can you tell me what's going on here? He goes, oh, yes, it's David Baldacci Day in Barga. Park over there. So I remember slowly rolling my window up. And this is the damsel in distress thing that I talked to you about before. I only write about strong, independent women who, don't take any crap from anybody ever. I just took my time rolling the window up. I just wanted a few seconds. And so then I looked over at my wife, and she's like, it's the laser beam stare she's giving me. She goes, David Baldacci Day. Are you freaking kidding me? I said, honey, I had no idea. Liar! Look how we're dressed. It was August, we're in like polo shirts and shorts and stuff. And so we got out, and Barga is a walled city like Lucca. So outside of Barga, it's New Barga. And New Barga dates from the 16th century. Inside the gates and the walls, it's Old Barga, which dates from the 11th century. So the gates open, and I noticed that over the city, they're flying the American flag for the first time since we liberated it in 1945. Out comes the mayor of Barga. He's draped in the American flag and Italian flag. Behind him is a marching band. Swear to God, a marching band, like you would see it like Nebraska or Ohio State. Behind the marching band are these journalists and videographers, and behind them, apparently everybody who lives in Barga. So we're hugging and kissing, and he greeting us, and we went on a tour of Barga. I did a book signing. I met with all the local leaders, and we went and had lunch. It was me, my friends, family, the mayor, 900 new friends. I do have to say that the fried meatballs are like, if you're ever in Barga, have the fried meatballs. Amazing stuff. And we had gelato by the gallon, and I went to the Duomo, and all this stuff was going on. But time was passing. We thought we were going to be there for a couple of hours. Now it's getting dark, and the problem is that we're staying at a villa on the side of a mountain. If you want views in Italy, you have to go up. So we're staying, and to get to this villa, it's a one-lane road. They do not believe in guardrails in Italy for whatever reason. So, you're right on the edge there, and it's like 3,000 feet down. I didn't want to drive that back in the dark. And so my wife said, look, this has been great. Tell the mayor we're out of here. So I went over and I said to the mayor, I said, this has been fantastic. I said, this has been one of the greatest days of my life. He goes, and now it is time for you to give your grand speech in the center courtyard of the city. I really thought I was being punked that whole day. We just had that feeling of it, right? So off we go to the grand courtyard, which is very pretty, and the marching band played one more song and then stopped. And then the mayor got up. They had interpreters because I can't speak Italian well enough to give a speech in it. Not that I had a speech to give. And then the mayor started giving us gifts. So one was an oil painting by a local artist. Another was sort of a lifetime supply of olive oil, which is a lot more than the 4 ounces you get to take on a plane. Another one was a generational chart of the Baldacci family from the 11th century to my grandfather's generation. I have that framed in my office. I learned of siblings of my grandfather I never even knew existed because they had never come to this country. So it just blew me away. Then they gave me a journal from the local archives. An ancestor of mine, Peter Baldacci, started writing in it in the 1600s. And because paper was so scarce back then, if you passed away and there was still paper left, you just handed it down. And so the last entries are in the 1880s. And that almost 280 years of Baldacci history, which, again, sort of blew me away. And then they called my kids, the Baldacci Bambinos, come on up, to get their stuff, right? So the sea of people part, and here my daughter starts walking up. My daughter, I think, was like 14, 15, right? And she's walking up, and she's not looking at the mayor. She's not looking at anybody except Dad. And she's giving Dad the death stare. Any man out there who has had a teenage daughter or has one, the death stare is this. And without saying a word, here's what she's saying to me. You've ruined my life. And I'm going to get you back. Now, to complete the Mars-Venus story, my son, who was like 11, here's how he walked up to get his stuff. So then it was my turn to give my speech. And I got up and I said, even though it's August and it's very hot, it feels like Christmas here because this gathering of family and friends and warmth and gifts and this connection to the past and connection to the present and into the future is just overpowering and just one of the finest days and experiences of my life. And after I finished talking, a friend of mine who would travel there with came over to me and said, "You have to meet these 4 gentlemen." So he led me over to these 4 elderly men. I learned that the youngest was 86, the oldest was 102. They all had, soft felt caps, they had canes, and they each had a copy of one of my books in Italian. They were all on a bench, and they all stood up, and they sort of bowed, took their caps off. And I looked at my friend, and I said, "Who are they?" He goes, "They're all Baldaccis. They all came from different countries to meet you today." So being Italian, we all cried and looked around for more food to eat. So years later, Lonely Planet travel people, they wrote me and said, "Hey, we're putting an anthology together of writers' travel stories. Do you have a particularly special story of travel that you would like to write about?" So the story I just told you is the one that I wrote for them, and it was called Going Home. Because even though I'd never been to Barga before, and every other critically important aspect and element of it, it really was home for me. So it was a great experience. Now, I do a lot of research for my novels. You can, if you read them, hopefully you can tell. There's a good. The critical rule about research is you have to leave almost all of it out. You can't just stick it in there. How many people here have read a flip book? It's a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer. A flip book is where a writer has done a lot of research and they're really proud of it, and they don't want to leave any of it out. So they find a place in the book to stick it. So you're reading it and enjoying the story, and you're like, "Oh my God, flip, 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 flip. Oh yeah, back to the story. Okay, that's great." You just got to leave most of it out. But research, while it's really important to write books well, it can get you in trouble. And it got me into a lot of trouble one time. I was on a train, an Acela train. I was going to go from Washington, D.C. to New York. And I was going up there for a meeting. And I'm sitting at a table with 2 guys I didn't know. We're just sharing a table. And I assumed they were businessmen. They had suits on, and they had, laptops, and back then they had Blackberries and, smartphones and miniature satellite towers. These guys were like doing business deals, and it was really cool. And I was on my phone, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's a medical examiner in the Bronx Medical Examiner's Office, and I needed to talk to her and interview her about some research that I needed to write a Split Second, the first in the King and Maxwell series. And all I wanted to do was, on the phone call, was just set up a time to meet with her face-to-face. I always like to meet with people when I'm researching, interviewing face-to-face, because body language can tell you a lot, and it's just a different experience over the phone. And I don't like getting it third hand. I don't employ research assistants, because I'm just getting somebody else's version of what they were told. Unfortunately, she said she was going to be leaving to go overseas on special assignment. She's going to be heading out to JFK before I even got to New York that day. For an investigation over there that the government was undertaking on behalf of a foreign government. It was all sort of hush-hush. She would have no communication back stateside, but she was going to be gone for 3 weeks. So I could either ask her my questions now or wait until she got back. I didn't want to wait because I was on sort of a strict deadline. So I said, "Okay, Doc, I don't usually like to do it this way, but this is the only time you can talk to me, so be it." So I had my notes, and I said, "Okay, Doc, this is basically how I want to murder the guy." Yeah, well, hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? And I went through my really elaborate poisoning technique that I'd given a lot of thought to. And I said, "Look, Doc, you have to understand when the police come, I want to make sure they don't even know homicides happened, that a murder hasn't even happened." And she goes, "David, trust me, if you do it the way you just described, there's not a police investigation that I know of protocols that would show this person's been murdered." I said, "Yeah, but there's going to be a postmortem done. I need to be able to make sure I fool a medical examiner. They won't know this person's been murdered either." She said, "David, trust me. I've often thought about murdering people." good public servant that she was. And she said, if you do it exactly as you described, there's not a postmortem protocol that I know of that would be able to detect that. It would be the perfect crime. So I asked her a few more questions, and I ended by saying, I got to tell you, Doc, if I ever need to kill anybody else, I'm going to call you. So I clicked off my phone down, and I finished writing my notes up. And then I looked up. The guy over here had spilled his coffee from his neck to his crotch. He was pissed off beyond belief. The guy right across from me, I will never forget the expression on his face. He wasn't saying anything. This is what he was doing, though. And over his shoulder, here come the Amtrak police. They have their own police force. I did not make it to New York that day. I was held as a person of interest by the Amtrak police, who apparently don't read a whole lot. So if you ever read Split Second and you have it in your collection, if you look at the acknowledgments, which is a place where writers thank people who help them, the very last acknowledgment in Split Second both reads like this and proves that the story I just told you is true. So that last acknowledgment reads, to any and all passengers on the Amtrak Acela train who might have overheard me discussing poisoning techniques and were probably scared out of their wits at my seemingly diabolical intent, I apologize. Now, the other thing I get from readers and fans, oh my God, you're a celebrity, everybody must know who you are, you must get recognized a lot in public. None of that happens. It just doesn't happen. We're not Mick Jagger level celebrities and athletes and all that. It's just not, which is great. We're sort of like anonymous celebrities, which is perfectly fine. I wouldn't want to be mobbed by people. But even when you're recognized in public as a writer, it's just not the ego stroke you think it would be, just not. I was at a restaurant with my wife in some city. We were just sitting in a booth having lunch, and a nice time, and I'm eating, and I'm kind of looking around the restaurant, and all the way across the restaurant, at a table against the wall, there's a man and woman, and the woman is like laser locked on me, boom, and I was like freaked out. I just kind of I looked away, and I looked down, and I was like, well, that was weird. I must have just totally misread that. So I'll give it a minute, and I look up, laser lock. It's like I had a sniper dot on my forehead. It just kind of really freaked me out. And I just looked at my meal after that and didn't look up anymore. And a few minutes went by, and then I noticed a presence next to us, to the booth, and I looked up. It wasn't our waitress, it was the woman. And so she pushes me over in the booth and sits down next to me. And she's so excited, and she said, "You are who I think you are, aren't you?" Any English teachers want to diagram that, baby? There's a lot going on in that sentence. It's a lot of weird stuff. Now, I'm trying to keep it calm. I have no idea if she's a psychopath, if she's armed, I don't know. So I said, well, do you read a lot of fiction? And she said, oh, yes, I do. I said, well, I guess I am who you think I am. And then she just lost it. She said, oh my God, never in my entire life did I think I have an opportunity to meet you. I can't process what is happening to me right now. This is the most magical moment of my entire life. And then she turns and screams across the restaurant to, I guess, her husband, and she says, I was right, Joe. It is John Grisham. I've known John a long time, like 20 years. He's a great guy. Whenever I've asked him to do a charity with me, he's always stepped up. Very classy guy. That moment in my life, not really feeling the love for John, though. And my poor wife, to put it delicately, she blew iced tea out of her nose. I've honestly never seen a woman laugh that hard in my life. It was remarkable. It really was. And then she turned to the woman and she said very politely, she said, that's the right genre, but the wrong author. And the woman looked at me and she said, oh my God, don't tell me you Baldacci? I said, yeah, I am. Obviously terribly chagrined, I was not Monsieur Grisham. She turns and screams across the restaurant again. And she said, you were right, Joe. It is the Italian. Thank you very much.
Let's give another round of applause for David Baldacci. Wasn't that great? Well, we hope you'll be joining us again tomorrow night for the keynote address with William Kent Kruger, author of, among other things, 18 acclaimed books in the Cork O'Connor mystery series, including the new prequel, Lightning Strike. Also be sure to join us on Saturday when over 35 authors will be presenting at venues around Telfair, Wright, and Chippewa Squares. And for Sunday's closing address, when we will host a conversation with Friends in Fiction, which is a group of 4 New York Times best-selling novelists. If anyone suggests you do something else this weekend, let them know your schedule is already fully booked. Thanks, I'll be here all weekend. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. David Baldacci will be signing books at the table on the right side of the theater in just a moment, so please make sure you've received a numbered signing card and line up according to your number, and we'll call you up in groups of 50. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.